Welcome to our deep dive, everyone. We're diving into how to win friends and influence people.
Yeah, a classic.
It really is. And today, we're going to unpack Dale Carnegie's advice, on winning friends and influencing people. But the best part is, you don't even have to read the whole book.
Right.
We're going to break it all down for you. Are you ready to unlock some seriously effective techniques? Techniques for better relationships.
Oh, absolutely. I think How to Win Friends and Influence People, it's a classic for a reason.
Yeah.
It's
Why do you think that is?
it's because those insights into human nature are timeless and surprisingly applicable to the modern world.
I think so too, yeah.
Yeah.
It all starts with Carnegie's core idea, right? That success in dealing with people really hinges on understanding them first.
Right.
It's not about manipulation.
Right.
It's about empathy and genuine connection.
Yeah.
And he even references a fascinating study from the University of Chicago that revealed something pretty unexpected about human nature.
Oh, yeah. This study, they actually spent 2 years on it.
Really?
A substantial amount of money, too.
Yeah.
Conducted by the University of Chicago and the United YMCA schools to figure out what adults were most interested in learning.
That's fascinating. I wonder what it is.
Well, health topped the list.
Okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
But it was the second most popular topic that caught Carnegie's attention.
I'm on the edge of my seat. What is it?
People.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. The study found that adults had a deep desire to understand people better.
Yeah.
To know how to get along with them, make them like them, and of course, how to win them over to their way of thinking.
Totally. Yeah, so it's like everybody's secretly yearning for this cheat sheet to human interaction.
Right. Well, that's what Carnegie set out to create.
I love that.
He spent years studying successful people. Inventors like Edison and Marconi, political figures like Franklin D. Roosevelt,
Right.
even movie stars.
Really? Yeah.
He wanted to understand the psychology behind their success,
Wow.
to uncover the techniques they use to connect with others
Yeah.
and to achieve their goals.
He was like a relationship scientist.
Right.
Just digging deep into the human experience.
Yeah.
Figuring out what makes people tick.
Yeah.
I love how he even uses some pretty controversial figures to illustrate his points.
Oh, yeah.
Like Two-Gun Crowley.
Oh, right.
Notorious gangster.
Yeah.
Even when facing capture, Crowley refused to blame himself.
Right.
Instead, he portrays himself as a victim.
It's
kind of wild.
a chilling example.
Yeah.
But it really demonstrates a fundamental aspect of human nature.
Okay.
The ego's need to self-preserve.
Yeah.
Even when, there's overwhelming evidence, people will often distort reality to protect their self-image.
That's so true, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not just hardened criminals. Like Carnegie brings up Al Capone,
Right.
who justified his criminal empire as simply providing lighter pleasures for people.
Right.
And then the Teapot Dome scandal,
Yo.
where this high-ranking government official, Albert B. Fall, he refused to accept any blame, even though he was caught in this web of corruption.
It's
Wild.
these examples, while extreme, they reveal a universal truth.
Yeah.
The tendency to avoid blame, it's
Ingrained.
it's deeply ingrained in us. It's
Yeah.
a way of, protecting our egos
Yeah.
from the discomfort of admitting fault.
I think so too. Yeah. So Carnegie's first principle, don't criticize, condemn, or complain.
Right.
It's not just about being nice.
Right.
It's about understanding this deeply rooted human tendency
Yeah.
and working with it, not against it.
Precisely. Criticism often triggers defensive-ness.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it makes it almost impossible to have a productive conversation,
Yeah.
let alone influence someone's thinking. Carnegie even cites Abraham Lincoln, early in his career. He had a penchant for criticizing others.
Oh,
But as he matured, Lincoln learned to control this impulse, recognizing that understanding and empathy, were far more effective in achieving his goals.
this brings us to that amazing story about Lincoln and General Meade
Oh, yeah.
during the Civil War. Lincoln was furious with Meade
Right.
for hesitating to attack Lee's army, missing a chance to end the war sooner.
All right.
He even drafted a scathing letter.
But he never sent it.
Right, he never sent it. I love that.
Lincoln recognized that, anger and criticism wouldn't solve anything. It would only damage Meade's confidence and potentially harm the war effort. Wow. This really highlights the importance of self-control,
Yeah.
especially for those in leadership positions.
That's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most difficult thing and the most effective thing is to simply hold back our initial reactions.
Right.
And okay, let's say we've mastered the art of not criticizing. What's the next step in winning people over?
Well, Carnegie's second principle is all about building genuine connections.
Okay.
Become genuinely interested in other people.
I love that.
Now, this goes beyond, surface level politeness. It's about tapping into that universal human desire to feel seen and understood.
I love that. And he tells that heartwarming story
Yeah.
about this father struggling to connect with his young son. The father was so caught up in his own world
Right.
that he couldn't see things from his son's perspective.
Right.
But when he made a conscious effort to understand his son's interests,
Their relationship transformed. The key takeaway here is that people are far more receptive to us when they feel valued and understood.
yeah.
Genuine interest is the foundation of any meaningful connection,
Totally.
whether it's, personal or professional.
Speaking of professional,
Yeah.
there's that great story about the banker, Charles R. Walters,
Right.
who needed some confidential information from a notoriously busy executive.
Right.
Instead of barging in with demands,
Yeah.
he started by asking about the executive's family, showing a genuine interest in his life outside of work.
And it completely disarmed the executive,
Wow.
making him far more willing to help.
That's really cool.
It demonstrates the power of simple human kindness.
Yeah.
Of recognizing that even in a professional setting, people are still people with lives, interests, and emotions beyond their job titles.
That's so true. It's like that saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Right.
But what about situations where you're trying to win over someone who's really tough to crack?
Right, yeah. Carnegie provides a fantastic example of this with a story of a bread salesman
Okay.
who spent years trying to land this big account.
Really?
He did everything by the book, presentations, samples, fancy dinners,
Yeah.
but nothing worked. Then he discovered the client was passionate about French pastries.
Really? A secret passion revealed.
Yes.
What did he do?
So instead of talking bread, he started asking the client about his trips to France, his favorite pastry shops, even his attempts at baking at home.
So he leaned into that, huh?
By tapping into the client's passion,
Yeah.
he created a genuine connection,
Yeah.
a shared interest that transcended the business transaction.
Totally. And I bet he ended up selling a whole lot more bread because of it.
Right.
It's such a reminder that we all have those things that light us up, those unique interests that make us feel alive.
Right.
And when someone takes the time to acknowledge those passions, it creates an instant bond.
Absolutely. And this leads us beautifully to the next principle,
Okay.
which might seem almost too simple.
Okay.
Smile.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. But Carnegie argues that a genuine smile, it communicates warmth, approachability, and goodwill.
Yeah.
It sets the stage for positive interaction.
It's like a universal language of kindness that instantly disarms people. He even tells the story of a guy who decided to experiment with smiling more.
Right.
And the results were remarkable.
Yeah.
People responded to him differently. They were friendlier, more helpful, more open to connecting.
It's fascinating because studies have shown that smiling can actually make us feel happier.
Oh, really?
It's a positive feedback loop.
Wow.
When we smile, our brain releases endorphins,
Yeah.
which elevates our mood. This makes us more approachable,
Right.
which in turn makes others more likely to smile back, creating a ripple effect of positivity.
Love that. A happiness chain reaction.
It is. This principle is even more crucial today,
Yeah.
in our digital age.
Yeah.
Like a simple smiley face in a text or email
Right.
can soften your tone and make your message more inviting.
Yeah. So next time you're feeling stressed or facing a difficult conversation,
Right.
remember the power of a smile.
Yeah.
It might just be the key to unlocking a more positive outcome.
Right.
But okay, let's say we're smiling, we're genuinely interested, we're holding back the criticism. What else can we do to truly connect with someone?
Well, this is where one of Carnegie's most powerful principles comes into play. Be a good listener. Encourage others to talk about themselves.
Yeah.
He recounts attending this dinner party and ending up in this lengthy conversation with a botanist,
Okay.
a topic, he knew very little about.
So how did he manage to hold a conversation for hours about something he wasn't even interested in?
By being a good listener.
I love that.
He asked questions, he showed genuine interest, And he encouraged the botanist to talk about his work.
Yeah.
The botanist walked away thinking Carnegie was a brilliant conversationalist, even though Carnegie barely said a word.
It's a brilliant illustration of how listening can be more powerful than talking.
Right.
We live in a world where everyone's trying to get their point across.
Right.
But truly listening, really hearing what someone has to say, is a rare and valuable skill.
It's about, being present, engaged, and truly interested in what the other person has to share. It's about creating a space where they feel heard, understood, and valued.
And when people feel that way, they're much more likely to open up to us, to trust us, and to be influenced by our ideas. But listening isn't just about being quiet, is it?
No.
It's about active engagement.
Exactly. Active listening involves asking clarifying questions.
Right.
Reflecting back what you've heard to ensure understanding.
Yeah.
Showing empathy for the speaker's perspective.
Yeah.
It's about making the other person feel like they're the most important person in the room at that moment.
And speaking of making people feel important,
Yeah.
that brings us to another key principle.
Right.
Talk in terms of the other person's interests.
Right?
Carnegie stresses that this is a fundamental way to capture someone's attention
Yeah.
and to forge a genuine connection.
He uses this example of a salesman who finally cracked the code with a tough client after years of trying. Turned out this client was this, hard-nosed businessman. But he was deeply passionate about the art of window display.
Oh, wow. Who knew?
Right.
So how did the salesman use this newfound knowledge to his advantage?
Well, he became a student of the client's passion.
Okay.
He started asking questions, about the client's favorite displays, the psychology behind visual merchandising, essentially turning the conversation into a learning opportunity for himself.
What a brilliant strategy.
It is.
Yeah.
By shifting the focus away from himself and onto the client's interests, the salesman created an instant bond.
Yeah.
He showed respect, sparked a genuine conversation, and ultimately won over a loyal customer.
This is a powerful reminder that tapping into those unique passions, those things that make someone's eyes light up, it's a surefire way to build rapport
Right.
and leave a lasting impression.
Absolutely.
And speaking of lasting impressions.
Right. That leads us perfectly into the sixth principle,
Okay.
which is all about recognizing and acknowledging the value in others. Make the other person feel important and do it sincerely.
I love the story Carnegie tells about this Connecticut attorney who visited his wife's elderly aunt,
Right.
who was living a somewhat lonely existence in a grand house filled with memories.
Right.
And the attorney noticed her beautiful Packard and decided to compliment her on her impeccable taste.
And her reaction was incredible.
Yeah.
She was so moved by his genuine appreciation that she insisted on giving him the Packard.
Oh my gosh, talk about a thank you note.
Right.
Wow.
That's a heartwarming example of how a simple act of kindness, a sincere expression of appreciation, can have a profound impact, especially on those who may be feeling overlooked or undervalued.
Totally.
There's a similar story involving George Eastman,
Yeah.
the founder of Kodak,
Yeah.
who wasn't known for being easily swayed.
Right.
But when an architect named Adamson complimented the beautiful woodwork in his office, Eastman's demeanor completely changed.
I bet. It's like everyone, no matter how successful or seemingly unapproachable, craves that feeling of being seen and appreciated.
Exactly. And the result,
Yeah.
Adamson landed a significant contract.
Wow.
But more importantly, he forged a genuine connection with Eastman, built on mutual respect and appreciation.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So these first 6 principles, while seemingly simple, are really laying the groundwork for meaningful interactions.
Right.
It's about shifting our mindset from me to we.
Yeah.
From trying to get our point across
Right.
to genuinely understanding the other person.
And that understanding is the foundation for everything else.
Yeah.
For winning people over to your way of thinking.
Right.
For becoming a leader. For building a life filled with meaningful connections.
I love that.
But we've only just scratched the surface.
Yeah.
There's so much more to explore.
I-
Okay, so we've learned how to lay the groundwork for these genuine connections. But what about those times when you need to persuade someone, win them over to your way of thinking?
Right.
That's where things can get a bit trickier, right? It can be tempting to, dive headfirst into an argument,
Yeah.
especially when we feel passionate about something.
Totally.
But Carnegie actually dedicates a whole section to avoiding arguments,
Really?
believing they're rarely productive.
I can see that when someone's telling me I'm wrong, my first instinct is to defend myself. Yeah. To listen to their point of view.
Exactly. Arguments create defensiveness, resentment, and rarely lead to genuine understanding, let alone change anyone's mind.
Right.
Carnegie tells a great story about a salesman named Patrick J. O'Hare,
Okay.
who had a reputation for being quite the hothead.
Oh.
He loved arguing, always had to be right.
I bet that wasn't helping him close deals.
You guessed it. His argumentative nature was actually driving customers away.
Wow.
So Carnegie gave him some pretty radical advice.
What was it?
Stop arguing. Focus on understanding the other person's perspective, finding common ground, building rapport.
I imagine that was a tough pill to swallow for someone who thrived on debate.
It was a complete shift for O'Hare,
Yeah.
but he gave it a try.
Oh.
And the results were remarkable.
Uh-huh.
His sales skyrocketed.
Ah.
Turns out people were far more receptive to his ideas when he wasn't constantly trying to prove them wrong.
It's a good reminder that sometimes the best way to win is to let go of the need to be right all the time.
Right.
It's more about building bridges than burning them.
Which leads perfectly to the next principle. Show respect for other opinions. Never say you're wrong.
Okay.
This one can be a real challenge.
Yeah.
Especially when we feel strongly about something.
But how do you navigate a disagreement without telling someone they're wrong? Isn't that just avoiding the issue?
It's not about avoiding, it's about reframing.
Okay.
Carnegie argues that telling someone they're wrong is a surefire way to shut down communication.
Yeah.
Instead, try acknowledging their perspective, even if you don't agree with it. He shares a story about an engineer, Parsons, who was in a heated discussion with a tax inspector.
Ooh, tax inspectors aren't exactly known for their flexibility. How did he handle that?
Instead of arguing back, Parsons started by acknowledging the inspector's expertise, expressing admiration for the challenges of his job.
Okay.
He even went so far as to say he wished he had the inspector's job because he could learn so much.
Wow. Talk about turning the tables. Did that actually work?
It worked like a charm.
Really?
The inspector, disarmed by Parsons' respect and even flattery, became much more receptive to his arguments,
Okay.
and they were able to reach an agreement.
It's a good reminder that sometimes a little bit of diplomacy can go a long way. It's about showing the other person that you value their opinion, even if you don't share it.
Exactly, and it creates a more collaborative atmosphere where people are more open to finding solutions that benefit everyone. But what happens when you're the one who's wrong?
That's a tough one. I know I struggle with admitting when I've made a mistake.
It can be challenging, but Carnegie's next principle addresses this head on. If you are wrong, admit it quickly and emphatically.
Okay.
He argues that acknowledging our mistakes quickly can be a sign of strength, not weakness.
It's like taking ownership of the situation instead of trying to hide from it.
Precisely. It demonstrates honesty, accountability, and a willingness to learn. Carnegie tells a powerful story about a father who had a falling out with his son. Years went by with the father filled with regret, but too proud to apologize.
That must have been incredibly difficult for both of them.
It was. But one day, the father decided to swallow his pride, went to his son, and admitted his mistake.
Wow.
He asked for forgiveness, and they were able to rebuild their relationship.
That's a beautiful reminder that sometimes the most important words we can say are, "I was wrong." And I bet that admitting our mistakes up front can be surprisingly effective in professional settings as well.
Absolutely. Carnegie tells the story of John D. Rockefeller Jr., who faced a tense situation with striking miners.
Oh,
Instead of defending his company, he surprised everyone by admitting that they'd made mistakes.
wow, that's pretty radical for a powerful businessman.
It was a risky move, but it paid off. The miners, disarmed by his honesty, were much more open to negotiation. Rockefeller understood that vulnerability can build trust and pave the way for finding solutions.
So we've talked about avoiding arguments, respecting opinions, and admitting mistakes. But what about when you're trying to introduce a new idea or get someone on board with a plan? How do you even begin that conversation?
Carnegie's advice is simple yet powerful. Begin in a friendly way.
Okay.
He argues that we often mirror the energy we receive. If someone is hostile, we tend to respond defensively.
It's like a negativity spiral. But how do you break that cycle?
By choosing to be friendly, even when it's difficult. He tells a great story about a manufacturer's representative who woke up with a terrible case of laryngitis on the day of a crucial meeting.
Oh no. What did he do? Cancel the meeting?
He went anyway.
Really?
He wrote a note explaining his situation, and to his surprise, the executives were incredibly understanding.
Wow.
The president even offered to do the talking for him, and they had a very productive meeting.
It's a reminder that a little bit of vulnerability, a touch of humor can go a long way in disarming people and creating a more positive dynamic.
Exactly. Friendliness sets the tone for collaboration, making people more receptive to your ideas. And speaking of receptivity, Carnegie's next principle is about finding common ground from the get-go. Get the other person saying yes, yes immediately.
I love that strategy. But how do you do that without seeming manipulative?
It's not about manipulation, it's about finding genuine points of agreement, no matter how small.
Okay.
Carnegie tells the story of a tenant who was trying to negotiate a rent reduction with a notoriously tough landlord.
That sounds like a losing battle.
It could have been.
Yeah.
But instead of arguing, the tenant started by listing all the benefits the landlord enjoyed by having him as a tenant. Always paying on time, taking good care of the property, being a respectful resident.
So he flipped the script. Instead of focusing on the disagreement, he highlighted all the things they already agreed on.
Exactly. And it worked. The landlord used tenants complaining, found himself nodding along, and the tenant successfully negotiated a rent reduction.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. It's a brilliant example of how starting with agreement, even on small points, can create a more collaborative atmosphere where people are more open to compromise. But what happens when you hit a roadblock when the other person has objections or concerns?
Well, Carnegie's next principle offers a surprising solution. Let the other person do a great deal of the talking.
Oh, interesting.
He believed that people are more easily persuaded by their own ideas than by ours.
So instead of trying to convince them, you let them convince themselves. I love that.
He shares a story about a salesman trying to sell a new product to a hesitant client.
Okay.
Instead of addressing each objection head-on, he simply asked the client, "What would you do if you were in my shoes?"
So he turned the tables completely.
He did. And the client put in that position started thinking about the product from a different perspective. He began coming up with solutions to his own objections, and ultimately he talked himself into buying it.
That's amazing. It shows the power of asking the right questions and letting the other person lead the way.
It allows them to feel ownership over the decision, leading to more creative and mutually beneficial solutions. And this leads beautifully into the next principle, which is all about tapping into that sense of ownership. Let the other person feel the idea is or hers.
That makes perfect sense. We're all much more invested in something when we feel like we're a part of it.
Exactly. Carnegie tells the story of Eugene Wesson, a salesman who had been trying unsuccessfully for 3 years to sell sketches to a particular buyer.
3 years.
He'd made over 150 calls with no luck.
I'd have given up long before then. What did he do differently?
He brought a stack of unfinished sketches to the buyer and asked for his help completing them.
What?
He appealed to the buyer's expertise, saying things like, "You have such a great eye for design. How would you finish these sketches to make them more appealing to your clients?"
So he turned the buyer into a collaborator?
Exactly. The buyer, flattered by Wesson's request, got involved in the creative process and ended up buying all the sketches.
Wow. It's a reminder that involving the other person, making them feel like they're part of the solution, can be incredibly persuasive.
It is.
It's like that old saying, tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn.
And this principle has become even more relevant in today's world. We see companies embracing co-creation with their customers, involving them in the design process to develop products that truly meet their needs.
It's a win-win situation. Customers feel valued and heard, and companies benefit from their insights and creativity.
Now, all of these principles we've discussed so far hinge on a fundamental element of human interaction, which Carnegie captures beautifully in his next principle. Try honestly to see things from the other person's point of view.
It sounds simple enough, but in practice, putting ourselves in someone else's shoes can be really challenging.
It requires empathy, the ability to step outside our own biases and preconceived notions, and truly understand where the other person is coming from. Carnegie tells a great story about a husband who constantly criticized his wife for her passion for gardening. He saw it as a waste of time and energy.
I can relate to that. Sometimes it's hard to understand why people enjoy the things they do.
It can be. But this husband decided to try a different approach.
Okay.
He asked his wife to teach him about gardening. He started helping her with the weeding and planting, and he began to ask her questions about why she found it so fulfilling.
So instead of judging her, he chose to understand her.
Exactly. And as he listened, he started to see things from her perspective. He realized gardening wasn't just a chore for her. It was a source of joy, relaxation, a way to connect with nature. And their relationship blossomed.
It's amazing how transformative empathy can be. When we make the effort to understand where someone else is coming from, it changes the whole dynamic of the interaction.
And this principle isn't just for personal relationships, it's crucial in business politics. Any situation where we're trying to persuade or influence others. When we can see things from their point of view, We can understand their needs, motivations, and objections, which allows us to tailor our message in a way that resonates with them.
It's like becoming a detective of human behavior.
What? There's another layer to this, right? It's not just about understanding, it's also about validation.
You're right. Carnegie's next principle builds on this idea of empathy. Be sympathetic to the other person's ideas and desires.
Okay.
This means acknowledging the legitimacy of their feelings, even if we don't necessarily agree with them.
I see.
He tells that great story about a park ranger who was constantly battling people, building campfires in unauthorized areas.
Right.
His stern approach, scolding and threatening fines, wasn't very effective.
So what did he do?
So he tried a different tactic. He started by acknowledging the appeal of a campfire, reminiscing about his own childhood experiences, connecting with them on a personal level.
He built rapport before laying down the law.
Exactly. And then he gently explained the dangers of building fires in unauthorized areas, appealing to their sense of responsibility and offering alternative locations where they could safely enjoy a campfire.
It's like he validated their desires while still enforcing the rules. Precisely. And his approach worked wonders. People were far more receptive to his message because he acknowledged their feelings.
It's a great reminder that even when we have to deliver difficult messages, a little bit of empathy and validation can make all the difference.
And this leads us to a principle that I find incredibly inspiring. Appeal to the nobler motives.
Okay.
Carnegie believed that everyone deep down has nobler motives, aspirations that go beyond self-interest.
It's like tapping into the best version of ourselves and encouraging others to do the same.
Exactly. Carnegie shares a story about Cyrus H.K. Curtis, the founder of the Saturday Evening Post, who was trying to attract top writers but couldn't afford their high fees.
So he had a problem.
He did.
What did he do?
So he came up with a brilliant strategy. He appealed to their nobler motives.
Instead of money, he offered them something more meaningful.
Yes. Instead of offering huge sums, he proposed donating a significant amount to their favorite charities in exchange for their contributions.
That's amazing. He turned it into a win-win situation, appealing to their desire to make a difference in the world. Did it work?
It did. Writers were drawn to the opportunity to use their talents for a greater good, and Curtis built a roster of talented contributors.
Wow.
It's a reminder that sometimes the most powerful motivator isn't money or personal gain, but the desire to contribute to something larger than ourselves.
And how do we make these nobler motives stand out? Sometimes the message can get lost in the noise of everyday life.
That's where Carnegie's next principle comes in. Dramatize your ideas.
Okay.
He argues that people are far more likely to remember and act on ideas that are presented in a vivid and compelling way.
It's a reminder that sometimes you have to think outside the box to find creative ways to make your message stand out and capture people's imagination.
And what better way to capture someone's imagination than with a challenge? Carnegie's final principle in this section is throw down a challenge.
I love that.
He believed that people are motivated by the opportunity to test their skills, overcome obstacles, and achieve something meaningful.
He shares that incredible story about Theodore Roosevelt, who almost backed out of running for governor of New York,
Right?
because the opposition had discovered he wasn't a legal resident.
Roosevelt was ready to quit, but then Thomas Collier Platt, a powerful political figure, challenged him directly, asking, "Is the hero of San Juan Hill a coward?"
Ooh, that's hitting below the belt.
It was, and it worked. Roosevelt, his pride wounded, decided to stay in the race and went on to become governor and eventually president of the United States. It shows the power of a well-placed challenge to ignite passion and inspire action.
But challenges don't have to be grand or life-altering. Carnegie also talks about how Al Smith, the governor of New York, used a challenge to convince Louis E. Laws to become the warden of Sing Sing prison, a notoriously difficult assignment.
Smith appealed to Laws's sense of duty, painting a picture of a corrupt and violent prison that desperately needed reform.
So he painted quite the picture.
He did.
Yeah.
Laws, inspired by the challenge, accepted the position and went on to become one of the most successful wardens in Sing Sing's history.
It's amazing how a challenge framed the right way can inspire people to step outside their comfort zones and achieve extraordinary things.
We've covered a lot of ground in this section, from avoiding arguments to throwing down challenges. But the key takeaway is that influencing others isn't about manipulation or force. It's about understanding human nature, building genuine connections, and inspiring people to act in accordance with their own values and aspirations.
It's about finding that sweet spot where your goals align with their desires, creating win-win situations where everyone benefits. But before we move on to the final set of principles, which are all about leadership, I want to take a moment to reflect on what we've learned so far.
What stands out to you? Which principles resonate most?
I think the most powerful concept for me is the idea that arguments are rarely effective. It's about finding common ground, building rapport, and letting go of the need to always be right.
I agree. And I'm struck by the importance of empathy. Truly understanding the other person's perspective is the foundation for all meaningful connection and influence.
It's like Carnegie is giving us a roadmap to navigating the complexities of human relationships, but it's up to us to put these principles into practice.
And that's where the real magic happens, when we start to see these principles not just as concepts, but as tools we can use in our everyday interactions. That's when we can truly unlock our potential to win friends and influence people.
All right, we're ready to dive into the final set of principles, all about becoming a leader and inspiring others to follow your lead. What's the first step on this leadership journey?
Well, Carnegie kicks it off with a principle that might seem a little bit counterintuitive at first.
Okay.
Begin with praise and honest appreciation. He believed that praise, when given sincerely, it's one of the most powerful motivators.
But isn't there a risk that, people become complacent if you praise them too much?
It's not about, showering people with empty compliments.
Right.
Carnegie emphasizes that praise must be genuine and specific.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing and acknowledging their efforts, their strengths, and their accomplishments.
He uses a great example from Abraham Lincoln,
Oh, yeah.
who, as we know, was known for his ability to inspire and motivate others, even when dealing with someone as ambitious and, sometimes difficult
Right.
as General Joseph Hooker. Lincoln found a way to use praise strategically.
Lincoln recognized that Hooker was talented, but also needed his ego managed. So he started his letter to Hooker with genuine praise, acknowledging his skills and accomplishments. But then he subtly, almost indirectly, pointed out some of Hooker's weaknesses, expressing concern that his tendency to be critical of others might backfire.
So he sandwiched the constructive criticism between layers of praise.
Exactly. And he ended the letter with another dose of encouragement, expressing confidence in Hooker's ability to lead the army to victory. Lincoln understood that different people respond to praise in different ways, and he tailored his approach accordingly.
It's like he was speaking Hooker's language, appealing to his desire for recognition while also subtly guiding him towards becoming a better leader.
Precisely. It highlights the importance of being strategic with praise, understanding the motivations and personality of the person you're dealing with. But what happens when someone makes a mistake? How do you address that without, demoralizing them?
Right. Carnegie has some pretty interesting advice for that, too. It's about being delicate but still getting your point across.
His next principle is a bit of a paradox. Call attention to people's mistakes indirectly.
Okay.
It's about finding ways to address errors without directly criticizing or blaming,
Right.
which often triggers defensiveness.
He tells that great story about a piano teacher, right?
Yep.
Who had a student with very long fingernails, which made it difficult to play properly.
Right.
Instead of criticizing the student directly, which might have discouraged her, the teacher took a more subtle approach.
Yeah. She started by complimenting the student's beautiful hands and nails.
Right.
And then she gently suggested that trimming her nails might make it easier to play the piano.
It's like she planted the seed and let the student come to her own conclusion.
Exactly. And it worked. The student, motivated by her desire to improve her playing, decided to trim her nails.
Yeah.
It highlights the power of suggestion.
Yeah.
Sometimes the best way to get people to change their behavior is to kind of guide them towards the solution rather than forcing it upon them.
It's about giving them the space to, realize the solution for themselves, which makes them more likely to embrace it.
Exactly.
Okay. So we've talked about the importance of praise,
Right.
addressing mistakes indirectly,
Yeah.
but leading by example. But how do you motivate people to take action to get things done?
Well, Carnegie's next principle is all about empowering others.
Okay.
Ask questions instead of giving direct orders. He believed that people are far more motivated and engaged when they feel like they're part of the decision-making process.
Right.
He shares an example from Owen D. Young, a successful businessman, known for his leadership skills. Young rarely gave direct orders. Instead, he would ask questions, solicit opinions, and encourage his employees to come up with their own solutions.
Okay.
When faced with a seemingly impossible deadline, Young didn't just bark orders. He called his employees together, explained the situation, and asked for their ideas on how to meet the deadline.
He turned it into a team effort, like a collaborative challenge.
Exactly. And his employees, inspired by the challenge and empowered by his trust in them, rose to the occasion. They came up with a plan that allowed them to meet the deadline and actually exceed expectations.
Wow. That's awesome. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the best way to lead is to step back and let others take ownership. But what about when things go wrong and someone really messes up?
Right.
How do you handle those situations?
Carnegie's next principle is all about preserving people's dignity, especially when they've made a mistake.
Okay.
Let the other person save face.
I like that.
Publicly humiliating someone, even if they deserve it, it's rarely effective. It damages their ego, creates resentment, and makes them less likely to learn from their mistakes.
He tells a fascinating story about Charles Steinmetz,
Oh, yeah.
this brilliant engineer who worked for General Electric. Steinmetz was a genius in his field, but a terrible manager.
Right.
GE needed to remove him from his management position,
Yeah.
but they didn't want to offend him or damage his reputation.
Right. So they came up with a clever solution.
What was it?
They created a new position for him, consulting engineer of General Electric.
I love that.
This new role allowed Steinmetz to continue doing what he was best at while preserving his ego.
It was a win-win situation.
It was.
Steinmetz felt valued,
Yeah,
and GE got a more effective manager for his department.
exactly. It's a great reminder that even in difficult situations, there are often creative solutions that allow everyone to save face and move forward in a positive direction. But what about when someone's struggling to improve? To meet expectations? How do you encourage them without being overly critical?
Carnegie has some really valuable advice for that, too. It's about recognizing effort, encouraging progress, even in small steps.
His next principle is all about positive reinforcement.
Okay.
Praise the slightest improvement and praise every improvement. Be hearty in your approbation and lavish in your praise. He believed that praise is a powerful motivator, especially when we see people putting in the effort to grow and improve.
He shares a story about a young man who had a difficult childhood and dreamed of becoming a writer, but faced constant rejection.
Right.
He was about to give up when he met an editor who saw potential in his work.
Instead of offering, a big payday, the editor offered something far more valuable: encouragement.
Oh, I love that.
He praised the young man's writing, offered constructive feedback, and encouraged him to keep going.
It's amazing how a little bit of belief in someone can change the entire trajectory of their life.
It is.
Okay.
The young man, inspired by the editor's support, kept writing and eventually became a successful author. It highlights the incredible power of encouragement, of recognizing effort and celebrating even the smallest improvements.
It's about focusing on progress, not perfection. Creating a supportive environment where people feel safe to take risks and learn from their mistakes. But how do you set high expectations without making people feel overwhelmed?
Well, Carnegie's next principle addresses that beautifully. Give the other person a fine reputation to live up to. He believed that people often live up to the expectations that are set for them.
Right. He tells a story about a woman who was having dinner at a hotel
Yeah.
and noticed that the dentist's equipment wasn't very clean.
Right.
And she pointed it out to the dentist, not in a complaining way, but simply as an observation.
Yeah.
The next day, she was amazed to find everything sparkling clean. The dentist had taken her comment to heart and gone above and beyond to ensure his equipment was spotless.
That's
crazy.
It's a great example of how a simple observation, a recognition of someone's potential for excellence, can inspire them to improve.
Right.
And it's not about, setting unrealistic expectations. It's about communicating your belief in their ability to do better, to reach their full potential.
Okay.
And finally, we arrive at Carnegie's last principle, which beautifully ties everything together.
Okay.
Make the other person happy about doing the thing you suggest.
I love that.
It's about finding ways to align your goals with the other person's desires, creating win-win situations where everyone benefits.
And he shares a fantastic story about Colonel Edward M. House, a close advisor to President Woodrow Wilson, who was a master of persuasion. Wilson wanted his Secretary of State, William Jennings Bryan, to accompany him on this diplomatic trip to Europe.
Right.
But Bryan was hesitant, fearing negative publicity.
So House, understanding Bryan's concerns and motivations, came up with a brilliant strategy.
What was it?
He told Bryan that the trip was actually beneath him,
Really?
that he was too important for such a low-level mission.
Oh, he appealed to Bryan's ego.
Exactly. And Bryan, flattered by the implication that he was, above such mundane matters, decided to stay home. House had achieved his goal without ever having to argue or make demands.
Wow, so sneaky. It's a brilliant example of how understanding human nature and a little bit of creativity can allow you to persuade people in a way that feels natural and effortless. So there you have it. Dale Carnegie's timeless principles for winning friends and influencing people. From building genuine connections to inspiring others to take action, these principles offer a roadmap for navigating the complexities of human interaction.
I think so too.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. I hope you found it to be valuable and insightful. These principles are just as relevant today as they were when Carnegie first wrote about them. They can be applied in every aspect of our lives, from our personal relationships to our professional endeavors.
Dale Carnegie emphasized the importance of understanding human nature. Based on what you've learned today, what are some of the most fundamental desires that drive people's actions? How might you apply this understanding in your own life?
That's a great question to ponder. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into how to win friends and influence people. And until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep connecting.
Waiting for tomorrow.